Many people blame racism for problems that disproportionately afflict Black people, like poverty. Is this true? Let's look at just facts. One of the strongest correlations in childhood poverty is living in a household with a single parent. In the US, 36% of children who live in homes led by single females are in poverty, a figure that falls to only 6% for children who live with married parents. Likewise, the poverty rate for Black married couples is 9%, which is well below the 13% rate for Asian divorced families and less than half of the 24% rate for white separated families. And way above poverty, the median household cash income for Black married couples is $88,000 per year. This doesn't include capital gains and a host of non-cash benefits that amount to tens of thousands of dollars per year. Leftists typically blame systemic racism for the poor economic conditions of many minorities. But as with education, these problems actually coincide with policies and mindsets that undermine the nuclear family, ideas leftists themselves promote. Despite the clear relationship between income and marriage, progressives have promoted premarital sex, cohabitation, and unwed childbearing. They've also enacted and expanded a vast array of welfare programs that financially incentivize these behaviors. With this, the portion of unmarried or non-family households in the U.S. has risen from 22% in 1947 to 52% in 2019. And non-married households are much more common in Democrat-controlled minority communities, but progressives try to explain away these realities with talking points that are at odds with the facts of the matter. For example, Jeff Spross, an economics and business correspondent for The Week, has alleged that the primary reason for the collapse of marriage in the U.S. is the demise of good middle-class jobs and economic security. This claim conflicts with the fact that the average inflation-adjusted income of U.S. middle-income households grew by 32% from 1979 to 2016. And for the poorest 20% of households, this figure rose by 74%. A rational look at the facts reveals a correlation to the marriage collapse that is pretty obvious. The spread of liberal views towards extramarital sex, divorce, and unwed childbearing. These disincentivize people from marrying and staying married. Since Gallup began polling Americans on these issues in 2001, moral acceptance of sex between unmarried men and women rose from 53% to 72%. Divorce rose from 59% to 77%. And having a baby out of wedlock rose from 45% to 66%. These changes took place in only the last 19 years, and much larger ones surely took place during the sexual revolution that began in the 1940s and burgeoned in the 1960s to 1980s. Moreover, liberals are 24 to 33 percentage points more likely to find those actions morally acceptable than conservatives. Ethics aside, the practical result of these actions is to spread workers' wages around an increasing number of homes, thus reducing household incomes and deepening poverty. Progressives also blame racism from decades in the past for economic disparities in the present, but these explanations don't hold water either. For instance, Jared Bernstein, the chief economist for Joe Biden during his vice presidency, claims that for as far back as we have the data, the Black unemployment rate has been twice that of the white rate. This, he says, is an example of the systemic racial injustice embedded in the economy. Yet data cited by Democratic President Lyndon B. Johnson in a 1965 speech directly refutes that storyline. 35 years ago, the rate of unemployment for Negroes and whites was about the same. Tonight, the Negro rate is twice as high. In 1948, the 8% unemployment rate for Negro teenage boys was actually less than that of whites. By last year, that rate had grown to 23%, as against 13% for whites unemployed. Notably, those racial disparities emerged and proliferated as the Democratic Party gained a foothold in Black communities. Per the textbook AP U.S. History All Access, virtually all blacks who could vote were registered as Republicans from 1865 until the 1930s. That began changing in the 1930s because, while Southern Democrats effectively blocked blacks from voting in the South, Northern blacks began switching in large numbers to the Democratic Party because they supported the New Deal welfare programs of Democratic President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Furthermore, those same racial disparities and others worsened as racism itself declined dramatically. For instance, Gallup polls going back for more than half a century reveal that the portion of Americans willing to vote for a black president rose from 37% in 1958 to 95% by 1999. As explained by Gallup, 95% is essentially universal willingness to state to an interviewer that the race of a candidate for president would make no difference. In fact, the portion of non-white voters willing to vote for a black president is essentially the same, 98% in 2012 and 93% in 2015. These figures are all within the survey's margins of error. Another progressive canard is that racial discrimination is to blame for the 18% wage gap between college-educated blacks and whites. In truth, this is yet another gap traceable to leftism, specifically the weak educational foundations that black students acquire in Democrat-run schools. In 2003, the American Institutes for Research assessed the literacy skills of graduating college students. This study found that among the students graduating at four-year colleges, 45% of whites and 17% of blacks were proficient in document literacy. 40% of whites and 5% of blacks were proficient in quantitative literacy. Likewise, a 2016 study by Georgetown University's Center on Education and the Workforce found that black college students are highly concentrated in lower-paying majors like administrative services and social work, and they are much less likely than other students to major in science, technology, engineering, and math, even though African Americans in these fields can earn as much as 50% more than African Americans who earned a bachelor's degree in art or psychology and social work. Those racial deficits in practical skills reduce the earning power of black people and limit their career choices. People of color suffer from poverty more frequently and severely than whites. However, the reasons for this are difficult to pin down because of the fact that association does not prove causation. Without a tightly controlled experiment, the cause can't be determined with certainty. Still, comprehensive facts show that racism, which is the common progressive explanation for these problems, is not associated with them. Instead, these problems are strongly associated across time and place with leftism. I'm Amanda Reed Sheik, here with Just Facts. For thorough documentation of every fact in this video and more facts about this issue, read the article Social Ills That Plague African Americans Coincide with Leftism, Not Racism at justfactsdaily.com.